Hi, I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. Welcome to Essential Issues, a retrospective series where I talk about my favorite DC comics of the past that are still affordably available today, blabbing about why they are special to me and what, if anything, they have to say about the essential issues of real life. Now, warning, this series does freely contain spoilers, but I think even spoiled, the stories I feature are still well worth reading. This time, we are taking a look at the opening arc of a series that cemented my belief that I will likely enjoy literally anything written by Gail Simone. Her run on The Secret Six is one of my favorites of all time. She writes extremely disturbing villains and takes me inside the minds of characters in ways that connect me to them and their struggles. But I already liked the idea of The Secret Six. What shocked me at the time is that somehow Gail Simone could make me care about Batgirl. I hate the very concept of Batgirl, and the cover art for the first issue is a snapshot of why. I already dislike it when spin-off characters retain the name of their source character, Supergirl, Superboy, Superwoman, Crypto the Superdog, and so on. I would rather they be connected to the source character while not using virtually the same name, motif, and costume. It just feels cheap and uncreative to me. And in the case of Batgirl, it's made worse by the fact that Batman was always meant to be scary, conceptualized by Bruce Wayne as this living urban legend that strikes fear in the hearts of criminals. At least the name Batwoman implies an adult female. Girl suggests, if anything, something less fully mature and less threatening than a Batman or Batwoman. But even worse is the fact that she lets her luxuriously bright red hair flow out of the back of her cowl, complementing bright purple and yellow elements that are almost equal in proportion to the black. And worst of all, the cover issue features her soaring through the air with a bright, glossy-lipped smile that completes a package far more suited, I think, to the runway of a fashion show than to going out and following in the footsteps of her namesake. It took a lot for me to get past that cover image, and it had everything to do with Gail Simone's Secret Six. So I gave this series a try, and I have to say that it was my absolute favorite among all the New 52 books when they were first being published. A year or so later, it was also the last book standing after a gradual disconnect on my part from DC Comics. I even dropped books about my favorite DC characters long before Batgirl. And when I finally did drop Batgirl, my last DC comic at the time, I always knew in my mind that I would eventually read the rest of it when it was cheaper in trade paperback or something. In recent years, when I gave the New 52 a second try using the DC Universe Infinite service, I finally read and unsurprisingly loved the rest of Gail Simone's run on Batgirl. And so I wanted to highlight this opening 6-issue story arc as kind of representative of the entire run by Gail Simone. Starting now with issue 1. I usually don't comment on comic book art unless it is either working strikingly well for me or is getting in the way of my enjoyment. As an overall comment, I'm really happy with the art throughout Gail Simone's run. Many times, liberal amounts of inky shadows are used that keep Batgirl from looking like the overly bright first impression on the cover. The generous ink also helps me believe at least a little bit now and then that criminals might find her intimidating under the right conditions. The detailing on Batgirl's costume, while still making it clear that she's in muscular fighting form, also has seams and plating throughout the design that help her feel like a relatively realistic or grounded character, especially when partnered with the way Simone writes Barbara Gordon. This first issue establishes the new status quo for Barbara Gordon, Batgirl, who for years had operated as the wheelchair-bound information resource for the superhero community known as Oracle. In the New 52, that time as Oracle was truncated to just the last 3 years. And through a medical miracle left undescribed for now, Barbara was able to recover full mobility, although she is haunted by her experience with the Joker's invasion of her home and the paralysis that resulted. And despite her full physical recovery, her muscle memory and combat reflexes are all rusty, making her both capable and vulnerable at the same time. Really cool. Meanwhile, as Barbara is getting back into the swing of things, both in her personal and crime-fighting lives, a mysterious serial killer calling himself the Mirror has begun targeting people who miraculously survived situations that statistically would have meant certain death. And Barbara Gordon is on his list. In issue 1, the standout element for me as a fan was being introduced to Barbara's internal monologue, which involves frequent self-criticism and self-deprecation, despite Barbara also being strongly determined. It's this blend of immense capability, insecurity, and girl-next-door humility that endeared me to her so quickly. Before I had a chance to say, well, who does she think she is, trying to follow in Batman's footsteps? She is beating me to the punch. And so she and I are both on a journey of being convinced that she is fit to be doing what she's doing. And as someone who is very insecure myself, I can't help but identify with Barbara's insecurities while also admiring her bravery and determination. Although post-traumatic stress is certainly a more obvious and likely intended theme of the first issue, a little moment that stood out to me was when a creepy group of home invaders about to kill a family explained to them that despite what their victims may think, they all come from, quote, good homes, loving parents, and the best schools. Intended or not, it was a reminder to me that being well off, quote unquote, however one might define that, is not the basis for a happy and stable life. In fact, favorable circumstances in life often keep us from relationship with God and a readiness to be shaped by Him, leading us down a self-destructive and futilely depressing path, as we see play out, for example, in the book of Ecclesiastes. In issue number 2, Barbara has her first encounter with the Mirror, who triggered her PTSD at the end of issue 1 by pointing a gun at her in the same way the Joker had when he shot and paralyzed her. Barbara's stunned hesitation in the moment results in a police officer's death, and Batgirl vows not to let Mirror escape, even though it means narrowly surviving a fight with him. Barbara recovers while trying to explain her injuries to her new roommate, and also while trying to resume a normal dating life. But when she tracks down enough clues to discover the Mirror's identity, she has a second encounter with him, this time via remote video, where Mirror informs her he has planted a bomb on a train in Gotham. Although this issue has more of what I loved in number 1, Batgirl's inner monologue seems to betray a bit of a political agenda on Simone's part, as Batgirl mentally comments on the unfair dominance of rich capitalists versus the state of the poor in Gotham. It has almost nothing to do with the immediate action of the scene in which it happens, and it doesn't flesh out Batgirl's character except perhaps to suggest that she votes for Democratic candidates. Not surprising content to find in a comic book, and not really irritating or off-putting, but it breaks the building tension and took me out of the story. The most striking and impactful story element to me is the reveal of Mirror's backstory. He was once a federal agent who watched his family burn alive in a car accident while only he was able to be pulled free. His statistically improbable survival combined with the tragedy he lived through contributed to his conclusion that these kinds of survival miracles are actually curses on those who survive. And so his mission is to give such survivors release from the life they've been cursed to retain. As someone with a vivid imagination, a tendency toward worry, and a habit of dwelling on mortality and the potential for tragedy to come in my remaining years of this life, this struck a chord with me. I can't help but wonder, if I live long enough to see those closest to me die, if I will fall into despair or be able to enduringly cling to hope in the promises of Jesus. As I've thought about that, recognizing that despair is actually a form of sin, even though we might not think of it that way, in light of that, I've been trying to remember 1 Corinthians 10:13, which is, no temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and He will not let you be tempted beyond your ability, but with the temptation He will also provide the way of escape, that you may be able to endure it. Based on this verse, I think I can conclude that God will at least provide a way for me to escape inevitably giving in to despair. Not escape from the circumstances, but escape in the form of some option I can choose instead of inevitably giving over to despair. which is what my fear would be and my assumption based on how weak I know I am. And so my recurring prayer is that God will help me choose that path if and when the time comes. In issue number 3, after saving some but not all of the Mirror's train bomb victims, Barbara tries to reach out to her dad, Commissioner Gordon, seemingly to in some way find comfort after her failure. But despite the shared love between them, she can't find what she needs with him. Her secrets as Batgirl force her to keep her father at an arm's length. But later, Nightwing approaches her while Batgirl is on patrol at night, wanting to make sure she is okay as she steps back into crime fighting and taking on the Mirror. Barbara takes offense at this and starts a playful sparring match with Dick Grayson, reflecting on their past romance while also trying to prove that she is once again capable enough to fight crime without well-meaning men trying to protect her. She certainly proves her point, but Nightwing startles her by saying, "Batgirl, Babs, stop. Batman and I were worried, yes. Not because we doubt you. It's because we love you. Do you really not see that?" It's a moving character moment for what it says about Barbara, Dick Grayson, and even Batman. And it's also thematically valuable. While the affirmation of equality and capability of women are good and healthy aspects of feminism, there is a form of feminism that becomes unnecessarily antagonistic in practice. And in many other cases outside women's issues, we can all find ourselves putting up walls against those who want to love and care for us, doing so out of an ultimately selfish and prideful desire to prove our own strength. Issue number 4 opens with a nightmare sequence revealing Barbara's feelings of guilt over the fact that a medical miracle allowed her to walk again while so many others never experienced the same. After starting to share some of these feelings with her new roommate and heading out on patrol, she mentally stumbles upon a way to lure the Mirror exactly where she wants him for a final confrontation. The Mirror takes the bait, and they have a final showdown in the Hall of Mirrors at an abandoned carnival. As she finally gets the upper hand and delivers the final blows of victory, she gives a sort of thesis statement for where she has arrived in her thoughts about the Mirror's tragic origin and her own miraculous recovery. She says, "You hated surviving. Your miracle seemed like being mocked by God. But we live in Gotham City, Mirror. Sometimes extraordinary things happen to the very worst people, and the best people suffer. And sometimes people get their miracles whether they deserve them or not. Whether they deserve them or not. Believe me, I know." And this reads almost like a passage from Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes 8:14 says there is a vanity that takes place on earth, that there are righteous people to whom it happens according to the deeds of the wicked, and there are wicked people to whom it happens according to the deeds of the righteous. I said that this also is vanity. So seemingly unfair blessings and curses in life are not evidence that God is mocking or that he does not exist. The Bible itself acknowledges that this type of unfairness is the nature of this broken world that God will one day remake. But the Bible does offer guidance in the midst of navigating a broken world. In Ecclesiastes 8:15, the very next verse, the writer says, "And I commend joy, for man has nothing better under the sun but to eat and drink and be joyful, for this will go with him in his toil through the days of his life that God has given him under the sun." I commend joy, he says, as though it's something that can be chosen. And earlier in Ecclesiastes 2:24 and 25 says there is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also, I saw, is from the hand of God. For apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? These verses hint at what is explored elsewhere in the Bible, the truth that in the unfairness of the world, we can learn how to choose and experience joy and peace in spite of those unfair realities. Issue 4 ends with a shocking guest at Barbara's door that is a far cry from the Joker, as readers may suspect or fear after the way Barbara was paralyzed years ago. Instead, it is Barbara's estranged mother, arrived for a surprise Christmas visit. Issue number 5 is the first of a short 2-issue arc that introduces Barbara's mother, who abandoned her and her father, Police Commissioner Gordon, when Barbara was very young. Barbara barely recognizes her, although her mother seems to hope they can immediately start patching things up. This understandably angers Barbara, and the conversation is over. However, even more interesting is the strange, seemingly contagious insanity appearing throughout Gotham, causing people to obsessively refer to the number 338 and commit insane crimes with no reasonable motive. It appears that a mystery woman named Gretel is behind this 338 mystery, and when Barbara realizes Bruce Wayne may somehow become a victim, she rushes to reach him at a public event. However, by the end of the issue, Gretel has arrived, and Bruce Wayne goes from nearly being a victim to becoming the latest to be infected with 338 insanity and about to attack Batgirl. I really love how Gail Simone writes genuinely disturbing antagonists, and in this case the most disturbing element is that the antagonist could be anybody, who then goes from being a person we've known for years to someone who wants to casually kill the next person they see unless they give them exactly $3.38. It gives a creepy fear of the unknown to the enemy that makes them impossible to predict or even identify in advance. Issue number 6 opens with Batgirl facing off against a mind-controlled Bruce Wayne, and highlights again how Barbara's insecurity, shared via her constantly running internal monologue, endears me so much to her. She suspects that Bruce may be faking his hypnotized state for the sake of witnesses, but realizes with dread that if he isn't faking, she just got back into the crime-fighting game, still getting back into practice, only to find herself going toe-to-toe with Batman. Her reverence, fearful respect, and affection for Bruce all come into play as she tries to subdue him without overdoing it and endangering him, or without underdoing it and getting herself killed. Amidst the action, her mind revisits when she woke up in the hospital after being shot and paralyzed, how late one night as her father slept in the hospital room, Batman came in through the window, and Barbara prepared for him to scold her for allowing the Joker to do this to her and falling short of all he had trained her to be. But instead he said nothing at all and simply held her hand as she lay in the hospital bed with frightened tears running down her eyes in the wake of the Joker's attack. I find it to be an emotionally powerful moment that speaks to the desire we each have to be loved and cared for by those in positions of power over us, perhaps our parents, our teachers, or on a more deeper level, God. After Barbara manages to bring Bruce back to his senses, she does some sleuthing and learns that the mystery woman Gretel was the victim of a brutal attack by a rich and powerful man that left her hospitalized, only to discover she now had the ability to hypnotize men and used that ability to take revenge on men like the one who hospitalized her. Seeing herself in Gretel, Batgirl asks Batman to try to be kind as he arrives on the scene where Batgirl is about to confront Gretel. Out of his own respect for Barbara, Batman noticeably holds back and allows Batgirl to lead in handling the situation. Gretel is captured and sent to Arkham, with the final note of the story being a reflection on Barbara's part that revenge never heals what's broken. It's a nice short story that rounds out the first 6 issues of this run and both retraces Batgirl's origins in a fresh way while also establishing her status quo in this new era of Batgirl storytelling. In issues after this, the stakes become more vicious and personal as Barbara's relationship with her mother and especially her younger brother create opportunities for the creation of a disturbing new villain that hits as close to home as you can get. It's great, nerdy action with a foundation of emotional, character-driven storytelling. It's a 1-2 combo present in all of my most treasured stories in geek entertainment. Sadly, after 34 issues and some annuals or one-shots along the way, Gail Simone's run on the book ended, replaced by a creative team that completely threw out the tone of the series and much of Barbara's personality, I think, in favor of an interpretation that made her seem as young and emotionally immature as a teenager. In other words, a Batgirl that was much more the Pater-repelling kind of concept I would naturally assume her to be at a glance. That said, Gail Simone's run of Batgirl is still one I would highly recommend, and the first 6 issues are a great way to find out if it's the kind of book you'll enjoy. You can read issues 1 through 6 in the trade paperback Batgirl Volume 1, The Darkest Reflection, for free if your local library is cool enough, for about $7 if you buy it on Amazon, and for $8, well, you can just get 1 month of DC Universe Infinite and binge read the entire run, which I think is a steal. Hey guys, Peter Franson here. Want to play games to save lives? Then join me again this year for Game Save, our annual charity fundraising event in support of St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, whose compassionate care and cutting-edge research has been saving the lives of children all over the world for decades. Joining the Game Save team only requires a willingness to ask friends and family to consider donating toward your fundraising efforts. Team members also usually do something fun and game-related to draw attention to their fundraising, like a special game night at your church or home, or like me, you could do a crazy 24-hour video game marathon. Now, I'm theming my fundraising around video games, but you can use tabletop games of any kind. What you do to raise funds is really entirely up to you, but by joining the Game Save team, you can get support and encouragement from myself, from other team members, and have more attention drawn to your fundraising efforts. You can get more info about the origins and heart behind Game Save itself at gamesave.christiangeekcentral.com. To join the team, just follow the invite link below, make an account at tiltify.com, then from your dashboard, create a new individual campaign using St. Jude Play Live 2022 as your cause, and check Support an Existing Campaign. Type CGC in the campaign search field and select CGC Game Save 22. To help your donors, I recommend including CGC Game Save 22 in the name of your individual campaign as well. After that, it's a short, simple process to finish up, and you'll be an official member of the Game Save 22 team. After that, as team leader, beginning in October, I provide team members with weekly tips and resources to make your fundraising as fun, easy, and effective as possible. October will be our main push for fundraising, capping things off with my annual 24-hour video gaming live stream on November 5th. Although you are welcome to continue fundraising until the end of November 30th, when our official final total will be tallied. If you have any questions before or after signing up, you can reach me anytime at paeter@spiritblade.com. I'm happy to help, and I hope you'll consider being a part of this with me. I can't wait to get started. Thanks for listening.